In April 1974, the members of Yes were completing their Tales from Topographic Oceans tour. This was an ambitious double LP concept album and is widely considered to be the most divisive release ever recorded by Yes, with many ardent Yes fans either strongly liking or disliking the album. Despite reaching the #1 spot in the UK, keyboardist Rick Wakeman found it difficult to relate to the band's new musical direction and felt that the album had a lot of padding, as he put it. He took less interest in the musical agenda of the band, and despite the sales success of the album, Wakeman advised Yes in May of 1974 that he was leaving. Soon after, the news hit the media, with Wakeman choosing to return to a solo career with his latest release, Journey to the Centre of the Earth. Wakeman's departure at the time left Yes with a massive void to fill, as Wakeman added significant flair, exuberance and keyboard virtuosity to the group. His ornate, classically inspired playing was an essential element in the early 1970s Yes landmarks like Fragile and Close to the Edge, which helped to establish the band as a leading force in the genre of progressive rock. At the time, Wakeman said, "I think we veered off the path with Tales because of various reasons, and if I had stayed with the band it would have veered off even more. It would have ruined the band and ruined a lot of good music. I think that because I have left, whoever will come in with them now will help the other 4 people pull it together, and they'll get back on the path and continue to make really good music. In the long run, it will undoubtedly be best for them." Alan White later said, "Morale was low and obviously people were disappointed because Rick was an important part of the band. I think we'd started working on some of the Relayer material before Rick left, but he had a bad taste in his mouth after playing and touring Tales from Topographic Oceans. And I guess he just wanted to carry on with his own music. We all got a grip and obviously started looking for a new person, and started working as a 4-piece to get the flow going. We spent a long time rehearsing, getting the basic ideas for Relayer together." Around 8 keyboard players were contacted as potential replacements. First on their list was Eddie Jobson, the young rising star who had played in Curved Air and Roxy Music. But Jobson politely turned down the offer, as he felt he wasn't yet ready to replace the towering figure of the great Wakeman. Keith Emerson was also contacted, but said that he wished to continue his success with ELP. Blue Weaver, an ex-member of the Strawbs, was asked by John Anderson to audition, but also turned the band down. Weaver suggested that they ask Tony Kaye back into the band, but that didn't happen. Vangelis, formerly of the psychedelic and progressive rock band Aphrodite's Child, was also asked to audition and shipped an impressive array of keyboards for the rehearsal, where he spent 2 weeks with the band. Anderson was a big fan of Vangelis, having recently visited him in Paris at the end of the Tales tour. He liked his modern electronic approach and of course collaborated with Vangelis a few years later. It also became clear that Vangelis had a strong personality, which Yes were not used to, and he rejected becoming part of the UK Musicians Union, which was a requirement for all members of the group. Steve Howe said, "Musically it would have been fantastic with Vangelis. He had a fantastically strong direction, but the reason it didn't work out with him was that when we said, let's play that again, he'd say, well, it won't be the same. We were kind of improvising, but we're learning our parts as we went along. And I think that's when we realised that he was such a spontaneous player that yes was going to be a problem for him. We were really about working out a solid arrangement and relying on him at any given point to play something that we'd recognise. Vangelis felt he didn't really need to. He was pretty overpowering. We could see the musical possibilities right from the beginning, but it just didn't really click. In August 1974, Vangelis said, I know all the records of Yes, and we don't exactly have the same perception. We go in two different directions. And I can say that Yes music is very interesting. In every record that they do, there are some parts I like, and some parts I don't. I think Topographic Oceans is more of a head work. I prefer heart work. Speaking about his chances of joining the band at the time, he said, it's difficult, it's a problem. Maybe we are going to do things together. Maybe I'm going to make a solo album with John. But about Yes, I can't say. After some time, it was suggested that Swiss musician and film composer Patrick Moraz be asked to audition. Moraz had a background in both jazz and classical music and appeared with the progressive rock bands Main Horse and Refugee, the latter originally being known as The Nice, which had featured Keith Emerson on keyboards. Yes's manager at the time, Brian Lane, invited Moraz to meet with the band. Vangelis's keyboards were still present in the studio, so he used these for the audition. I tuned the instruments before we started playing together, and that gave me an opportunity to play around with those keyboards that Vangelis had used while the guys were getting ready. I was improvising, showing a bit of my speed and ability, and they stopped talking and all gathered around the electric piano and the Moog to watch and listen. I played all sorts of things, including a little bit of And You and I. Steve Howe said, we did an audition and we liked the guy and he was enthusiastic. And once we had Patrick there, we were up and running. Patrick was brilliant and more than capable of holding the fort. Moraz said, apparently it was a unanimous decision. The day after I played with them for the very first time, I got a call telling me that I was in the band as an equal member and my presence was being requested immediately. And you may recall the following lyrics from the Remembering from the Tales from Topographic Oceans album. There is a reference to a relayer, being someone who relays or communicates a message. I haven't been able to find any details on why Relayer was chosen as the title for the follow-up album. So I guess that either Anderson considered Relayer was an important enough figure to carry over, or perhaps he just liked the sound of that word.
Peaceful lives will not deliver freedom. Fight to we go. Destroy oppression. The point to reaction. As leaders look to you, attacking you.
The Gates of Delirium. This is the opening track on the LP and is the album's masterful centerpiece. The inspiration for the song came after Anderson viewed images showing the destruction and devastation at the closing stages of the Vietnam War. Anderson said, "It was still a very sad time with Vietnam lingering in my mind and the Cold War. There seemed to be no end to the cycle of warmongering around the world. Anderson originally planned to present Relayer as another concept similar to Tales from Topographic Oceans, with the whole album to be based on the literary work War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. But instead he opted for just one side-long track inspired by its themes. Early during rehearsal sessions for the new album, Anderson presented several short musical ideas to the group on the piano. As with the song Close to the Edge, which I have spoken about in an earlier video, the Gates of Delirium was recorded in sections at a time. Eddie Offord said, "When you listen to the music on that album, it sounds consistent and planned, with each musical note in its right place." In reality, during the recording phase, there were fragments of ideas that were recorded and then chopped, sliced, edited and spliced together in the editing phase. Anderson said, "The ideas would come to me very fast, and structure was something that I was learning about at the time. So I'd always be one step ahead of the guys while they were learning the last part, and I'd be on to the next part, sort of leading the way." The majority of the musical sections in this work were developed following Wakeman's departure, when the group was still a four-piece. Shortly after Moraz joined, he presented Anderson with a copy of the recently published Delirious. The novel has an abstract, trippy science fiction theme, and although the story itself wasn't drawn upon in the song, it is plausible that the English translation of the title was carried over. And as you may be aware, the word delirium describes a medical condition which can reduce the ability to think clearly because of a fever or mental condition, resulting in a state of acute confusion, disorientation and disturbance in an individual. So in this context, I guess the title implies that those who start wars suffer from delirium. So let's have a listen to this song. I've decided to break the piece up into 5 sections. The live footage I'm about to show has terrible audio, so I've tried to sync the video to the live audio from the Yes Show's LP, which is a lot better and also has Moraz playing on it. The composite result is not perfect, as the performances are from different concerts, but it's the best I can do. The quiet introduction belies the cacophony which is about to follow. Before long, the lyrics begin and the first 2 verses state the intention to stand and fight, to deliver the debts of honour. The peaceful lives do not deliver freedom. The need to destroy oppression is also mentioned. This section is in a major key, suggestive of optimism, as the warriors seek freedom and a better life. By the time of the 5th verse, the lyrics become very direct and dark indeed, as we hear the most chilling and sinister lines, "Yes would ever deliver."
Listen, your friends have been broken. They tell us of your poison. Now we know. Kill them. Give them as they give us. Slay them. Burn their children's laughter onto hell.
Stand and fight, we do consider reminded of an inner pact between us that's seen as we go. And right there, emotion to feels in debts of honor. Stand the marchers, soaring talons, peaceful lives will not deliver freedom. Fighting we know. Destroy oppression. The point to reaction as leaders look to you. Attacking.
Before we go any further, let's have a look at some manuscripts showing part of the prelude. In bars 82 to 94, that's 13 bars, we have 11 time signature changes. Now that is a lot, but not unique for Yes. The time signature changes help to make the music sound a little more interesting. Here, Squire and White deliver the rhythm which represents armed riders on horseback, approaching the enemy. The fighters are full of bloodthirsty determination and terrifying self-belief. We also hear Howe's metallic, harsh and piercing guitar, which builds the tension with unforgiving purpose. The feelings of hostility escalate as the warriors remind themselves of why they wish to fight. There is a lot to talk about in this section. First of all, the tempo picks up, the adrenaline starts pumping, and it's time to do or die, as the listener is placed at the very heart of this darkest of human deeds. There is a deliberate instrumental cacophony representing the battle, and we hear many warlike sound effects over the music, including flying shrapnel, machine gun fire, buzzing machinery, crashes of metal, smashing glass and other disturbing sounds to represent the escalating intensity of the fighting. Alan White said, "It extended to John and myself going to a scrapyard and banging pieces of metal in the morning for about an hour to see what sounded good. We actually built a frame in the studio made out of springs and car parts. This tower of car parts was deliberately pushed over during the recording to represent a significant moment in the battle. Musically, the melody rises and builds to a point of almost unbearable tension, which is released by the slowing of White's snare drum and the ushering in of the change to the next section. After the snare drum ritardando, we hear the first solo entry of new keyboard player Patrick Moraz as he introduces a second melodic theme using a glorious Minimoog synth sound. Moraz's lead marks the beginning of this section to briefly herald an unmistakable sense of jubilant euphoria. How then follows by playing his variation of this theme on the guitar.
soon the light, ours to shade for all time, ours the right.
The final part of the song is called Soon, which represents some of the most beautiful 4 minutes yes ever recorded. And I can still remember hearing this part of the song in my teens for the first time and thinking this sounds just epic. The part begins in the first moment of calm, pre-dawn. There is a sense of eeriness amongst the darkness and silence before the shimmering rays of the sunrise appear, represented by the sound of a mellotron increasing in volume as dawn breaks. The mist and smoke clear, and before too long, Howe plays a pedal steel guitar. This section represents signs of lament as the bodies of fallen fighters are now seen strewn across the battlefield. And there is a sudden realization of the cost of the battle. This changes the happy celebration from the previous section into something more introspective and reflective as feelings of immense sorrow emerge. Before long, Anderson delivers words of healing and peace. Soon, in some ways, draws parallels with After the Ordeal by Genesis, which is also a realization of the cost of the fighting in the Battle of Epping Forest. But in Soon, the setting is much more real and confronting.
Soon, oh soon the light, pass within and soothe this endless night. I'll wait here for you, our reason to be here. Soon, oh soon the time, oh we move to gain will reach and come. Our heart is open, our reason to be here. Long ago, sent it to rhyme. Soon, oh soon the light, ours to shake for all time, ours the right. The sun will lead us, our reason to be here.
As you may be aware, all the members of Yes had a strong interest in classical music, with Howe and Moraz in particular having received strong formal training in this area. Anderson, to my knowledge, didn't have any musical training, but fully embraced the classical genre and held impressionistic composers such as Ravel, Debussy, Stravinsky and Holst in high regard. The final section of Soon contains a series of major and minor chords over a C and briefly a B-flat pedal point, the latter change giving the music a momentary and distinct feeling of unease. Let's have a listen now to Neptune from the Planets orchestral suite written by Holst, which I think bears similarities to the final section of Soon, having a series of major and minor triads against some pedal notes. The suite Neptune nicely captures the atmosphere of a cold and lonely planet. Soundchaser. Alan White said the following about this song. We were working in the studio and doing quite a lot of really crazy stuff. I had this rhythm that I'd been playing for a while and Chris came up with the initial lick to go with it. Then with Steve, the three of us started working on putting it all together. The idea of speeding up and slowing down took a long time to get right. I mean, it has to be done perfectly. The idea behind it was the feeling of being in a car, going down the freeway changing gears. We tried to do that with music. It was an interesting concept. At his audition, Moraz was asked to play along with a rough version of this song. Moraz was staggered. They played it at an unbelievable speed. They blew my mind. I was in the middle and they were starting to do this riff, and Alan was crashing with his drums and so on. And they had probably just worked on this 3-part harmony there. It was absolutely unbelievable.
But the moments spent spread tales of change within the sound. Catching forth the rhythm, rhythmic freedom moves to counterbalance stars, expound our conscience, all to know and see the look in your eyes.
To experience that, I could say, was the truest surround experience I had ever encountered as an observer and listener. I was totally overwhelmed because they played so fast and so precisely. The swing was there. I had never heard such original music except for what the Mahavishnu Orchestra was doing at the time. Then casually John and Chris said, "We need an introduction to this. Can you come up with something?" So Moraz responded by playing a fast arpeggio on a Fender Rhodes, an instrument more commonly used in jazz and fusion, which immediately captured the band's attention. I explained the rhythm to Alan and Chris. I even suggested to John that he use his flute, but actually it was a piccolo, to which I could play these little fast clusters. The whole thing was recorded there in the next 30 minutes, and that's what came out on the record, before I was offered the job. Chick Corea and Return to Forever were one of Moraz's influences at the time. So let's have a listen to a piece by Chick Corea in a similar style. During the audition, Alan White was buzzing with excitement following the new addition to the track. White said, "The first time Patrick played with us, he had this jazzy prog kind of intro that became the opening of Soundchaser. It didn't really have a fixed time to it, but rather it was something that was felt between the keyboards and the drums." Soundchaser, more than any other Yes song, contains elements of jazz fusion arrangements. One of the highlights is Steve Howe's ambitious solo at the 3-minute mark, which I think demonstrates the influence of John McLaughlin and Al Di Meola at that time. The band members realised they had a special piece of music on their hands. Steve Howe said, "Soundchaser is like this madman from hell, an indescribable mixture of Patrick's jazzy keyboard and my weird sort of flamenco electric." An outrageously different song for Yes is a perfect description for Soundchaser. A fusion prog piece fueled by Moraz's jazzy keys and a manic rhythm section. I believe the lyrics speak of a sense of boundless energy in a celebration of our relationship with sound and how music can amaze, excite and connect people. The cha-cha-cha section, which appears twice, I think is simply a moment of letting go and letting out a spontaneous release of joy and emotion upon hearing an exciting piece of music. Soundchaser has frequent rhythm changes and instrumental breaks to give a sense of musical diversity, evolution and constant movement. Moraz's jazz fusion influences can also be heard on his mini-moog solo towards the end of the piece, which sounds distinctly more like Chick Corea or Jan Hammer rather than Rick Wakeman or Keith Emerson, and reinforces the fusion-influenced exploration that Yes took with this song.
From the moment I reached out to hold, I felt a sound. And what touches our soul slowly moves, has touched me by house. And to know that tempo will continue, lost in trance of dances, as rhythm takes another turn. As is my want, I only reach to look in your
To Be Over.
Holding doors will open every way. You wander through pathways of way.
Relayer concludes with its most straightforward piece, the reflective To Be Over. This song offers some melodic respite after the fast-paced Soundchaser. Howe's layered guitars, sitar and pedal steel guitar provide a tranquil, soothing and meditative experience. The song originated when Anderson spent an afternoon at Howe's house in London, and Howe played a piece he was working on following a boat ride on the Serpentine Lake in Hyde Park, London. The music gives the listener a relaxed feeling of just floating downstream on a river on a summer's day, and the lyrics reinforce a sense of serenity, peace and positive vibes. The opening section has Howe creating a volume swell on his guitar to mimic the crescendo associated with a violin note, for example. It feels like the music is always climbing, repeatedly resolving and moving forward. To be over, I think, can be interpreted to mean to be complete and to be whole again. The worst is over and we can prepare for the future with hope. But the song doesn't stay relaxed for long, as in familiar Yes style, it builds with Steve Howe's country-like guitar playing on a steel guitar and finally reaches a nice intermediate crescendo. The second half also features a great synthesizer solo from Moraz. Squire uses a Fender jazz bass on this song, which is a departure from his usual cream-coloured Rickenbacker RM 1999, probably because he was seeking more mellow sound for this piece. From start to finish, this is a gorgeous prog lullaby, and the song feels like a logical conclusion to the album. Let's talk about the artwork. The album's sleeve was designed and illustrated by English artist Roger Dean, who had designed artwork for the band since 1971, with one of his designs being the iconic Yes bubble-type logo, which first appeared on Close to the Edge. In his 1975 book Views, Dean picked the Relayer album as his favourite Yes cover. He drew what he described as a giant Gothic cave and a sort of fortified city for military monks, as he put it. The painting originated from a watercolour Dean had sketched while at college back in 1966. The final painting was done with tones of grey, and notably the artwork is not colourful like the previous Tales album cover, and is almost a monochrome piece. The images depicted in many of Dean's album covers set an otherworldly tone, and act as a visual representation of the band's creative style. The warriors on horseback nicely reflect the lyrical themes of war present in the album's main work. And the sleeve also includes an untitled 4-stanza poem. The album was recorded at Squire's house in New Pipers in Virginia Water, Surrey, a grand estate he purchased in late 1972. This marked the first time Yes had made an album outside of London. Howe's main guitar on the album was a 1955 Fender Telecaster, marking a stylistic departure from his usual Gibson models used on earlier albums. Howe said, "For me, every Yes album was always a journey to find better sounds and ways of interpreting the music. When it came to Relayer, I decided I was going to go Fender, but not a Stratocaster because the sound was so common at that time." The Telecaster is also one of the greatest guitars ever designed, and I was so excited to have a great 1955 model. It felt just right for the album. Yes were joined by Eddie Offord, who had worked with the band since 1970 as their engineer and later as a co-producer and live sound mixer. Offord installed a mobile 24-track recording machine and mixing desk in Squire's basement for the recording, while the mixing was completed at Advision Studios in London. Relayer was the final Yes album with Offord before he left in 1975 to work with other bands. Moraz said the following about the recording of the album. "When we started to record Relayer, some of the music had already been written and rehearsed by Chris, John, Steve and Alan. I contributed as much as I could to the overall picture of the pieces. However, it is a fact that Steve used quite a lot of tracks for his many overdubs everywhere on the album, except where there is no guitar at all, which is a rare occasion." Chris Squire said, "It was a very different album. We were growing and experimenting and trying new things. There was definitely a bit of jazz rock fusion going on." Alan White said, "The Gates of Delirium was one of the hardest numbers we ever did. It demands a hell of a lot of energy and precision, and of course if it's played sloppily, it just doesn't work. We were very prog-minded and experimental in those days. We were looking for anything that sounded different. People always ask me what my favourite Yes album is. From the perspective of where the rhythm section is coming from, I always single out the Relayer album. As you may recall, there was no single release from the previous Tales from Topographic Oceans album, but the song Soon was released as the single from the Relayer album. It didn't chart, and I'm not sure how many radio stations played it. And while it is a beautiful work featuring Howe's weeping pedal steel guitar, it also delivers a mournful and heartbreaking sadness. And Soon doesn't have the impact when played on its own, as it requires the drama of the preceding pieces to be fully appreciated." Relayer was another landmark Yes album, and of course, as we know, it was unlike any album either before or after it. It stands on its own as a unique entity in the Yes catalogue. It was the 7th album released by Yes in only 5 years, which is a grand achievement. It is a sonic extravaganza and one of the band's most complex albums. It was also Yes's last truly fearless prog-rock excursion, and with a 3-year break between Relayer and going for the one, Relayer really feels like the end of an era for Yes. It only had 3 tracks, which marked a step back to the format of their highly regarded masterpiece, Close to the Edge. Although much has been said about the ambiguous nature of Anderson's lyrics, the words on The Gates of Delirium without doubt are his most straightforward. You may also remember that Yes had previously mentioned the subject of war in earlier recordings. For example, in the song Yours Is No Disgrace from their 1971 release of the Yes album. The lyrics speak of soldiers travelling on a sailing ship, leaving any place, and suddenly experiencing a change from summer to winter. And earlier on the album Yes, from 1969, a song called Harold Land spoke of a man who had been taken away from everyday normality and placed into the horrors of war. He knows it's going to be tough and that he may well die, promising that he would return, but in reality doubted that he would. The Gates of Delirium is a roller coaster ride, and I believe is one of the band's most accomplished achievements. Being a brilliantly constructed masterwork, it is certainly a pinnacle achievement in progressive rock, and worthy of comparison, I believe, with post-romantic classical composers such as Stravinsky, Shostakovich and Schoenberg. I also believe that the Gates of Delirium manages to capture a clear musical image embodying human conflict, terror, destruction and loss, even without considering the lyrics. Like Tales, Relayer was the brainchild of Anderson and Howe. The session started without a keyboard player, which led to the compositions being very much guitar-based. And I believe the album is really a tour de force for Steve Howe, and his guitar is out front from start to finish. There may be some who say there's too much guitar, but I love the guitar on the album just the way it is. Patrick Moraz, I believe, did a wonderful job of filling the void left by Wakeman, and gives the work a very nice flow. Being the new guy, I think Moraz might have been moved into the background somewhat to provide sonic textures or layers rather than being a major lead instrumentalist. But there are several parts where he is allowed to shine, and in these, he shines very brightly. Moraz aptly demonstrated that he is a keyboard virtuoso in his own right by adding his own brilliance. Comparing him with Wakeman is pointless. They are simply different players and both great in their own way. The Relayer album, like the album which preceded it, is in many ways another stylistic departure for Yes, who took a leap of faith and dived into uncharted waters, and I'm glad that they did. And in closing, I also need to say something about Alan White's drumming on this album. As you will recall, Alan joined Yes at quite short notice after Bill Bruford left after the recording of the Close to the Edge album. Bruford is a brilliant drummer, and I don't believe anyone disliked the eloquent, intricate and jazzy drum sound he brought to Yes. And I have to say that Alan was also a great drummer. He played with more of a straight beat, delivering heavy, bold, energetic and exciting rhythms, which required a lot of stamina, and I think he did a brilliant job on Relayer. And to be honest, I think the Gates of Delirium needed Alan's big sound and power to help elevate the song to the masterwork it became. Alan brought his own personality and style to the songs, and I think he was a great fit for the band as they moved to more of a pop rock or pop prog feel in the 1980s and beyond. Bill and Alan's styles are both great, and they nicely complemented different eras of Yes. So my name is Tom, I thank you for watching, and I look forward to preparing and presenting other videos in this series on classic prog rock albums.